Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Until my junior year of college, there was nothing that I wanted more in life than to become a professional classical trumpet player. It was very serious. I had been playing since I was 10 years old, and I loved everything about the life of a musician. Are there any professional or amateur musicians in here? Some. I loved the diligence required to work on a specific passage over and over until it was perfect. And I loved the camaraderie of playing in a small brass quintet or with 200 other people performing a Mahler symphony. I loved the intoxicating mix of nerves and exhilaration before a concert. Because at its best, my job was to connect audiences with something transcendent and to create art that brought people together. I felt like I was born to play the trumpet. And that all changed during the summer of 2017, when in the middle of performing in a concert at a summer music festival, I felt a sharp pain in the upper lip, in the middle of my upper lip. And it was at the end of a long day of practicing and rehearsing in concerts, and I had pinched a nerve in my embouchure. It was a rare overuse injury. And in the following months, I learned from my doctors that the kind of nerve damage that I had might never heal. So before that concert, I had been on what I thought was a straight and clear path. It would have been very hard work to become a professional musician, but I knew what I wanted, and I kind of knew what it would take. But now the path that I thought was mine had disappeared, and for the first time I felt a real deep sense of aimlessness. As my friends raced past me towards their first jobs and exciting graduate degrees, I had no idea what to do next, or who I was supposed to become, or how to even begin figuring it out. And I would guess that almost every person in this room at one point or another in your lives has felt that kind of uncertainty. We've all come to unexpected crossroads that we didn't want, where we had a major decision to make or receive news that has upended our plans for our future, or closed one chapter of our lives without knowing exactly what was going to come in the next chapter. You go from feeling like you know who you are and where you're headed to feeling like you're in the wilderness. Perhaps you're in one of these wildernesses now. And if you've ever been in my position, you might identify with the desperate hope that I had after my injury that a clear path would soon unfold out of the fog that now lay before me. What I really could have used was the clarity seemingly promised to the Israelites in one of the opening scenes of our Parsha this week, Re-eh. We read that as soon as the Israelites crossed into the land of Israel, they were supposed to split up into two groups, with half of the tribes gathering on Mount Gerizim and the other half gathering on Mount Ebal. And the Levites would stand in the valley between these two mountains and call out the blessings of a life lived according to the Torah towards this mountain, and the curses of a life not lived according to the Torah towards that mountain, all of the blessings and the curses that we've been reading about the past few weeks in the book of Deuteronomy. And the entire people would answer Amen to both. And the pshat of this image, to me, seems crystal clear. Life in the land is going to present you with choices. Each choice is going to manifest in either a blessing or a curse. All you have to do is turn towards the mountain of blessing. It's this amazing image, hundreds of thousands of our ancestors shouting Amen to a life with two straightforward binary choices. Halavai that life was that simple. In some ways, this image is so jarringly binary that it almost feels like a desperate attempt to whitewash or cover up the actual situation that the Israelites were in at this moment. Because at this point in their story, the Israelites are themselves making their way through both a physical and spiritual wilderness that probably felt as murky as any that we have experienced. They could see the promised land in front of them. They could physically see it on the other side of the Jordan, but they still had no idea what would happen when they crossed. They had no idea who they would be, who they could be, what they would face, how they would respond to the challenges of setting up a new society. Because they'd been brought out of one identity in Egypt as slaves, but they hadn't yet been brought into a new identity as a free people in their land. And I would imagine that the right path forward probably felt anything but obvious and binary. And the Torah anticipates that the Israelites would be unable to survive in such a feeling of limbo for very long, and that they would seek out quick fixes to all of these existential questions now facing them. And so in chapter 13, shortly after this dramatic tableau on the two mountains, we read a very stern warning against seeking the advice of false prophets and fortune tellers. If there appears among you a prophet or a dream diviner who gives you a sign or a portent, saying, "Let us follow and worship another God, whom you have not yet experienced," even if the sign or the portent named to you comes true, do not heed the words of that prophet or that dream diviner. God seems to intuit that the Israelites, staggering around in the dark, in the literal wilderness and in spiritual limbo, are likely to run towards the easiest answers they can find to the enormous questions lurking on the other side of the Jordan. Who will we be now that we're no longer slaves? How should we act? Who should we become? It makes sense that they would eagerly seek the wisdom of someone posing as all-knowing, local fortune tellers and soothsayers who could offer a clear and easy roadmap out of the fog. And so God issues this stern rebuke. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin plays out this scene of the Israelites seeking advice from fortune tellers. And it explores what happens to our souls when we seek easy answers to complex questions. It explains that ordinarily someone who asks advice from a prophet is called a shoel, an asker. But when it's discussing these Israelites who would rush so quickly to seek the advice of fortune tellers, the Mishnah calls the seeker a nish'al, one who is asked, in the passive tense. So they transform from a shoel, who's active, to a nish'al, who's passive. And the Tosafot Yom Tov notices this little shift in his commentary, and he explains that the person who thinks that they are taking control of their lives by asking a fortune teller about their future ends up being the one who is controlled. In attempting to assert control over his future, the seeker of premature answers becomes passive in his search for the right way forward and loses control over his future entirely. After my injury, I grasped at any glimmers of certainty that I could possibly find. For a few months, I applied for the same jobs at the same consulting firms where all my friends were applying, and I dove into my work as a history major, and I thought maybe I would get a PhD in history. There were lots of good paths out of this wilderness, paths well trod by many of my friends and mentors. But the more I pursued them, the more it felt like I was trying on someone else's clothes that were 2 sizes too small. These paths were great choices for other people, but they weren't the right choice for me. Externally sourced solutions were not going to cut it. And so I needed to find a way to dwell within this period of cloudy uncertainty in my life. I needed to settle my mind and get as comfortable as possible for a short time with the utter unknowability of my future. Rabbeinu Bachya, a 13th century commentator, wrote a lot about how to move through periods of life like this that demand from us this kind of slow introspection. In his commentary on the opening phrase of our parsha, which is Re-eh anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha uklala, see, today I have set before you blessing and curse on those 2 mountains. Commenting on that verse, Rabbeinu Bachya suggests that this commandment to see the blessings and the curses is really a commandment to look head on, to literally see the periods of spiritual confusion or cloudiness in our lives without fear, to see them, and to be diligent in working through them on their own timelines. In a beautiful metaphor, he compares the soul of a person to soil in a garden. He says, some earth is easy to work, and it does not take too much time to make things grow from such earth. Other parts of the earth are by nature hard and difficult to work. Nonetheless, the farmer must not abandon it in despair. He must invest extra time and will find that eventually even such earth will yield its produce. When we are in the wilderness, suspended between certainty that's receding in our rearview mirror and facing a still unknown future, it's natural to demand smooth answers, to desperately want someone else to tell us who we are or what comes next, to till only the softest soil because maybe that will yield the fastest crop. But if the earth of our souls is hard, we need to find a way to cultivate the spaciousness, to stay with the work of tilling, to turn it over little by little. There's no other way, no better way, Rabbeinu Bachya is telling us, to move through the wilderness and out to the blessings on the other side. We are living at a time in history that makes it very difficult to value and make time for that kind of spaciousness. We're living in an age where it's vogue to seek easy answers to existential questions. We're living in a culture that expects glossy, shiny, social media-ready perfection and self-assurance. And we're living in a political environment that is becoming more simplistic by the day, placing a premium on blunt indignation and hair-trigger reactions and cheap slogans, while sidelining thoughtfulness and diligence and patience and reckoning with the hard and complicated truths. As spiritual seekers, it can be doubly exhausting to face our own uncertain futures when that is the state of our world. But tomorrow night, we will step into the month of Elul, the month that leads us into the journey of the high holidays. And we will be invited for several weeks to step out of all of that muck. Elul is a month where we're asked to slow down and open our eyes wider than we have in the past 11 months as we make our way toward a new year, to hold our perceived truths about who we are and how we act and where we're headed a little more lightly. Elul is a month of self-examination, of basking in uncertainty, of brutal honesty. It's a month designed to celebrate that fact of stumbling through the wilderness, to support us as we squarely look at who we are and who we might want to become. And in that way, it's one of the most precious gifts that our calendar has to offer. Elul invites us to look at the tangle of blessings and curses and possible routes through the wilderness of the coming year and see that tangle as fertile ground for our personal growth. The work of the month ahead is what Suleika Juad, the author, calls learning how to swim in the ocean of not knowing. Learning how to swim in the ocean of not knowing. That's what we're about to do. To not force clarity if there is none to be had yet. To get as comfortable as we can for a prescribed amount of time that will end with the discomfort of our uncertain futures. And to welcome this discomfort as a critical step in our journeys that will eventually lead us out of the wilderness. This work is not easy. It can be so daunting and overwhelming that the Torah includes this whole passage about false prophets as a warning against the strong instinct that we all have to shut our eyes and do everything we can to avoid having to stare into the abyss. But the brilliance of Elul is that we experience it alongside our friends and our family and our neighbors. We're each engaging in our own version of this work. So as a community, through learning together and davening together and hearing the shofar together, doing the hard work of tshuva together, we can support each other as we each face down our own wildernesses. The work ahead of us is profound, and in many ways the journey of Elul is a solo journey. But we will each embark on that journey surrounded by people whose own journeys remind us that we're never actually wandering alone. And so as we enter into this very holy time of year, may we each be blessed, and may we each bless each other with the courage to resist the allure of easy answers to the biggest questions in our lives, and the patience to till the hard soil of our souls until deeper, more honest truths about who we are and where we're headed begin to emerge. Shabbat Shalom.